The Everglades swallowed sound at night. Daniel Hayes pedaled along Shark Valley's narrow asphalt path, his bicycle tires humming softly, the only man-made noise breaking the stillness. The swamp was alive, of course. Frogs trilled in relentless choruses, owls hooted somewhere in the sawgrass, and the occasional splash of a gator rolling in the water carried across the black surface of the canal. But there was a peculiar weight to the night, as though the darkness itself pressed against his skin. He adjusted his headlamp, its cone of light cutting through the heavy air. Another quiet one, he muttered under his breath, though he didn't believe it. Out here, in this kind of silence, quiet usually meant something was watching. Hayes had worked these patrols for 5 years. As a ranger, it was his duty to keep the path clear, check for stranded tourists, and discourage the poachers who occasionally slipped in under cover of night. But the Burmese pythons, that was the real reason. Florida's Python Challenge and the culling teams had thinned their numbers somewhat, but Shark Valley was still one of the hot zones. He'd seen their massive bodies strung across the trail before, basking in the residual warmth of the asphalt. And he'd seen what they did to deer, raccoons, and even the gators. He preferred not to think about people. A faint rustle to his left made him ease off the pedals. He coasted silently, peering into the grass. Something had moved there. The reeds swayed unnaturally, a ripple rolling against the breeze. Hayes slowed to a stop. He tapped his radio clipped to his vest, then frowned. The signal meter was dead. Out here, that wasn't unusual, but tonight felt like a curse. "Anyone out there?" He called softly, his voice measured, controlled. No reply, only frogs and the slow drip of water from the mangroves. He climbed off his bike and crouched near the path's edge. His flashlight beam swept over a muddy patch of bank. The impression was clear, a wide trail, as if something had dragged itself from the canal into the grass. The print was deep, heavy, too wide for a gator, too smooth for a wild hog. Hayes tightened. "Damn," he whispered. The tireless rumor of the Everglades echoed in his memory. Locals had been spotting a particularly large python, longer than a pickup, fat from years of feeding. Hunters had tried and failed to catch it. Some said it was just a story to spook tourists. Others swore it was real. Standing there, looking at the crushed reeds, Hayes knew which side he believed. He got back on his bike and started forward, faster this time, sweat running down his spine despite the cool night. The trail stretched ahead, a thin gray ribbon vanishing into the darkness. The watchtower was 7 miles in, too far to sprint, but at least it was a goal. The rustle came again, louder, closer. Hayes tightened his grip on the handlebars. "Stay calm. Just ride," he told himself. His voice sounded brittle in the empty swamp. Then the sound shifted. Not just the whisper of reeds this time, but a distinct dragging, like wet rope being pulled through gravel. Hayes snapped his headlamp toward the noise. For a heartbeat, he thought it was a fallen log lying across the path. But the log moved. Scales glistened faintly, catching the beam like slick armor. Oh, hell no. He swerved hard, the tires skidding against the edge of the asphalt. The bike wobbled, nearly toppling. Hayes kicked the pedal, forcing momentum. His breath came in ragged bursts as the enormous body slithered across the trail behind him. He didn't dare look back fully. He didn't need to. The faint tremor under his wheels told him the ground itself shifted with the serpent's weight. Minutes passed like hours as he pedaled furiously. Sweat blurred his vision, and the humid air burned in his lungs. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The headlamp's glow barely reached, but he caught the unmistakable glint of scales weaving through grass. Following him, hunting him. Not tonight. Hayes growled, forcing himself onward. His legs screamed, muscles tight as wire. Every few yards, the rustling sound would fade, only to return, louder, closer, keeping pace with his panic. Ahead, the path curved sharply near a narrow footbridge. Hayes steered onto it, the wooden planks groaning under the bike's weight. The canal gleamed black on both sides, its still surface broken by the faint ripple of something large moving just beneath. Alligator eyes reflected in the light. 2 sets, then 3, watching. The sound behind him grew louder in an instant. No longer the creeping drag, but a violent surge. He spun the pedals with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. Something slammed into the rear wheel. Hayes flew forward, the handlebars ripping from his hands. He crashed on the boards, pain exploding through his shoulder and ribs. The bike clattered aside. Before he could scramble up, a coil wrapped around his ankle, yanking him backward across the wood. The world tilted sickeningly as he clawed for purchase. His flashlight rolled, its beam spinning wildly, catching glimpses of scales as thick as his forearm. "God, no, no, no," he shouted, thrashing. He kicked with his free foot, boot connecting with solid muscle. The snake only tightened, the pressure bruising bone. His hand fumbled for the knife, sheathed at his hip. He dragged it free, slashing blindly at the dark shape. The blade scraped scales, barely breaking the surface. The python jerked, then cinched tighter, dragging him inexorably toward the railing, toward the black water waiting below. Hayes' chest heaved as panic clawed at his throat. He forced the air out in a ragged yell, stabbing again, harder this time. The knife sank shallowly, drawing a hiss that rattled the night. The coils loosened just enough for him to wrench one leg free. He kicked wildly, rolling toward the railing, desperate for leverage. The canal water below rippled again. Alligator eyes hovered, patient, drawn to the struggle. Hayes' heart hammered. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me," he gasped. For a moment, he saw himself clearly, pinned between python and gator, the swamp itself conspiring to devour him. The absurdity nearly broke him. Then anger burned away the fear. "Not like this," he growled, jamming a broken board between the tightening coils. The wood splintered, but it bought him precious space to breathe. His chest ached from the crushing force. The python shifted, massive head rising into the beam of the rolling flashlight. Its eyes reflected a cold, alien intelligence, unblinking. The jaw opened slightly, revealing curved fangs, not for venom, but for grip. Hayes felt the raw intent radiating from it. He bared his teeth in a snarl. "Come on, then. Let's see who quits first." The board snapped with a crack like gunfire. The coils pressed again. Hayes screamed in fury and slashed downward with all his strength, aiming for the thick neck. The knife bit deep this time, hot blood spraying across his arm. The python recoiled violently, thrashing across the planks, loosening its hold enough for Hayes to roll free. He scrambled to his feet, chest heaving, vision swimming. The snake retreated into the reeds with a furious hiss, the grass whipping and parting as its enormous body vanished. Hayes staggered to the bike, dragging it upright. His ribs burned, ankle throbbing where the coil had gripped. His radio remained silent, dead in his vest pocket. He looked back at the black canal, at the gator eyes still watching, and then at the path stretching deeper into darkness. His heart thundered, but his resolve hardened. The python was out there, following, waiting. Hayes spat into the reeds, his voice hoarse but steady. "You'll have to do better than that." He climbed onto the bike, forced his legs to pedal, and rode into the dark. The bike rattled over the asphalt, Hayes' breath coming in shallow gasps. His ribs throbbed, and every push of the pedals sent lightning down his ankle where the coils had gripped. The swamp air felt heavier now, smothering. Behind him, the reeds whispered again. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Nothing visible, just a shivering ripple where the grass met the water. But he knew the python wasn't gone. It was shadowing him, biding its time. "Stay on the path, Daniel," he whispered to himself. "Stay on the damn path." The words gave little comfort. He rode another 100 yards before his bike lights sputtered, flickered, and died. Not now. He smacked the casing with the heel of his hand. The bulb flared briefly, then went black. The world around him plunged in a swamp dark, thicker than tar. His chest tightened as the silence grew, broken only by the faint slap of water against the bank. Hayes slowed, straining to hear. Something dragged against asphalt behind him, the low rasp of scale on stone. He dismounted slowly, careful not to make sudden noise. His flashlight, still clutched in his fist, clicked on with a shaky beam. The circle of light illuminated the trail behind him. At first, He saw only his own bike's tire tracks. Then the beam slid farther back and landed on a thick, gleaming body stretched across the asphalt. The python lay in a lazy coil, head lifted, tongue flicking. Hayes' breath hitched. It wasn't retreating anymore. It was waiting. "God help me," he murmured. He took a cautious step backward. The snake's head bobbed slightly, following the movement. The next instant, it surged forward. Hayes stumbled, raising the flashlight. The beam caught the serpent's head just as it struck. Its jaws clamped onto his boot, and coils shot forward like a whip. He hit the ground hard, the impact driving air from his lungs. The coils wrapped his leg, then his torso, crushing. Hayes gasped, clawing at the snake's body. "No, no, no." He slashed with his knife, the blade sparking against scales. The python hissed, a deep, chilling sound, and constricted tighter. His ribs screamed under the pressure. The world narrowed into black dots at the edge of his vision. "Think, Daniel. Don't panic." His own voice sounded far away, muffled under the pounding of blood in his ears. He forced his arm free, digging into the ground until his fingers closed on a broken branch. With every shred of strength, he jammed the wood between the coils and his chest. The snake flexed, but the stick gave him a pocket of space, just enough for a gulp of air. The reprieve lasted seconds. The branch cracked. The python adjusted, the pressure grinding bone against bone. Hayes' eyes bulged as he fought to breathe. His knife slipped from his fingers into the grass. Panic surged again. He thrashed, kicking with his free leg. "Get off me!" His boot struck something solid, the serpent's head. The python recoiled slightly, then lunged back, jaws snapping shut just shy of his thigh. Hayes rolled sideways, clawing desperately through the grass for his blade. His hand landed on the metal hilt, and he swung upward in blind fury. The knife plunged into the python's side, not deep enough to kill, but enough to wound. The serpent thrashed, its body slamming against him like a battering ram. He flew sideways, crashing into the ditch beside the path. Mud and water splashed over him as he struggled to stand. From the canal came a different sound, a low grunt, followed by a splash. Hayes froze. Two yellow eyes floated on the water, fixed on him. A gator. Oh, great. As if this wasn't enough. The python slithered closer, coils dragging mud, intent on broken. Hayes backed against the ditch wall, knife trembling in his grip. His flashlight lay somewhere in the weeds, its beam casting erratic angles across the scene. He spoke aloud, partly to steady himself. "You're not taking me. Not like this. Not tonight." The python lunged again. Hayes dove sideways, rolling onto the path. The coils missed him by inches, snapping the reeds flat where he'd been. He staggered upright, chest burning. He pressed his back to the trail's center line, forcing distance between the snake and the canal's edge. Gators on one side, python on the other. He couldn't afford to slip. The serpent rose again, its massive head swaying inches from his chest. Hayes raised the knife, shaking. "Back off!" His shout echoed across the swamp, startling a flock of night herons into flight. But the python didn't back off. It struck. Hayes dropped flat, the head whooshing past overhead. He drove the knife upward into the exposed belly. The blade sank halfway to the hilt. The snake shrieked, an unholy, guttural hiss, and recoiled, writhing in pain. Hayes scrambled to his bike, yanking it upright with trembling hands. The rear wheel was bent from the earlier attack, wobbling on its axis, but it wouldn't move. It had to. He mounted and pedaled, legs trembling, ribs aching with each breath. Behind him, the python thrashed against the reeds and raged. Come on, move," he panted. The wheel wobbled, but carried him forward. Every turn of the pedal felt like fire in his lungs. For a moment, he dared to believe he'd gained ground. Then he heard it again, the relentless drag through the grass, the hiss carried on the night air. Hayes' voice broke into a whisper, half a plea, half defiance. "You're not done with me, are you?" He forced his gaze forward toward the watchtower that lay somewhere ahead in the endless dark. But even as he rode, the knowledge gnawed at him. The python was faster than it should have been, bolder, It wasn't acting like any he'd seen before, and it wasn't hunting for food. It was hunting him. The path stretched ahead like a ribbon of gray swallowed by black. Hayes forced the bent bike forward, its rear wheel groaning in protest, each pedal stroke a battle against both machine and body. His chest ached from the python's crushing coils. His ribs felt cracked. Sweat dripped into his eyes, stinging. The swamp was quiet again. Too quiet. Hayes hated that silence. He wanted the frogs back, the crickets, even mosquitoes whining in his ears. Silence meant something big was out there, moving, scaring the smaller life into hiding. He muttered through clenched teeth, "Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't give it the chance." But his body screamed for a break. After a half mile, his legs gave out, and he coasted to a shaky halt near a bend in the trail. He leaned the bike against the railing and doubled over, gasping for air. The reeds across the canal shifted. Hayes froze, watching. At first, nothing. Then the water bulged as if a log rolled just under the surface. Two sets of eyes broke the black water, gleaming gold in the faint spill of his flashlight. Gators. Fantastic, Hayes muttered. Whole swamps lining up to take a piece. He pushed himself upright, rubbing the bruised side of his chest. A hiss of pain slipped from his lips. His ribs weren't just sore, they were cracked, maybe broken. "Get it together, Danny," he told himself. "People depend on you out here. You don't quit." Something heavy shifted in the grass behind him. He spun, flashlight beam cutting through reeds. For an instant, he thought it was the python again. Instead, a broad shadow detached itself from the foliage. A gator, massive, hauling itself onto the bank. Its jaws opened with a wet snap, releasing a low growl that vibrated through Hayes' feet. He staggered backward, gripping his knife. "Oh, come on," he hissed. The gator slid forward a foot, eyes locked. Hayes raised the blade, though he knew a knife was useless here. He prayed it was just a bluff. Then, from the opposite bank, came a deeper crash. The reeds bent violently. Hayes' heart stopped. That sound wasn't a gator. He knew before he saw it. The python poured out of the grass like a living nightmare, its body endless, scales glistening wet under his light. It hit the trail with terrifying speed, coiling in a single motion. Hayes barely leapt aside as the coils slammed where he'd stood, the impact rattling the boards beneath him. The gator roared, startled by the sudden violence, and lunged, not at Hayes, but at the serpent. The swamp exploded into chaos. "Jesus!" Hayes shouted, stumbling backward. The python whipped its coils around the gator's midsection, the two titans thrashing across the trail. The gator's jaws clamped down on the snake's body, teeth grinding scales, while the python squeezed tighter, muscles rippling with each contraction. Hayes pressed against the railing, torn between horror and awe. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be real." But it was happening right in front of him. Apex predators tearing each other apart. The gator thrashed sideways, slamming the python into the railing. The wood cracked. Hayes felt the vibration through his spine. The python recoiled, releasing just enough to whip its head around. It struck, fangs burying into the gator's thick hide. The gator bellowed, rolling violently, dragging the python half into the water. Hayes didn't wait to see who won. He grabbed his bike, ignoring the agony in his chest, and shoved forward down the trail. Behind him, the fight raged on, water splashing, wood breaking. Every sound chased him. The hiss, the roar, the violent thrash of bodies too massive to comprehend. But the noise didn't last. Within a minute, silence fell again, the kind that made his stomach drop. He knew what that silence meant. He whispered through clenched teeth, "If you killed it, stay there. If you didn't, don't follow me." A wet dragging answered. Hayes swore under his breath and pushed harder. His bike clattered over uneven planks, the rear wheel wobbling dangerously. He pedaled until his lungs felt like fire. When he finally risked a glance back, he saw nothing but darkness. But the swamp had gone too quiet again. He slowed, heart hammering, every nerve on fire. His flashlight beam shook as he swept it across the path. Shadows bent in ways they shouldn't. Then movement. The python's massive body slid out of the reeds ahead of him this time. cutting across the trail. It hadn't followed. It had circled. Hayes skidded to a halt, almost tipping the bike. His mind screamed to turn back, but he knew it would be waiting there too. He spoke aloud, voice shaking. "You're smart. You're hunting me." The serpent lifted its head, tongue flicking, unblinking. Hayes pulled the knife, his only comfort in the black. He raised it high, forcing strength into his voice. "I'm not your meal. You hear me? I'm not your meal." The python surged forward, coils whipping. Hayes dove sideways, rolling across asphalt. His flashlight clattered away, beams spinning wildly. He slashed as the serpent passed, blade tearing a shallow line across its flank. The python recoiled, furious. Hayes scrambled for the flashlight, grabbing it just as a coil slammed down where his head had been. Asphalt cracked under the impact. He crawled backward, light in one hand, knife in the other. The python advanced, unstoppable. His chest ached, breath ragged. He couldn't keep this up. He needed higher ground. He needed distance. The watchtower. It wasn't close, not nearly, but it was the only sanctuary he could picture. Hayes spat blood into the grass and muttered, "Then that's where I'll die trying." He darted past the serpent's coiled body, knife slashing wildly to keep it back, and threw himself onto the bike. The rear wheel screamed, but held. He pedaled with everything he had left, the swamp blurring past in streaks of shadow. Behind him came the inevitable hiss, the drag of coils tearing through the grass, relentless. The python was still with him, and it wasn't stopping. The swamp smelled different as Hayes pushed forward, sharper, tinged with smoke. Not fire exactly, but something cooked on charcoal. His mind latched onto the scent, desperate for any sign of humanity. He rounded a curve in the trail, and there it was, a small ant. Our end flickering on the canal bank, its glow reflected on rippling water. Beside it, a figure hunched over a bucket, lines cast into the canal. A man. Relief nearly buckled Hayes' knees. "Hey!" Hayes shouted, his voice cracking. "Hey, you there!" The fisherman turned, startled. A stocky man in his 40s, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a faded shirt rolled at the sleeves. His face, lined by sun and years, softened when he saw Hayes stumble into the light. "Dios mío," the man said, rising. "You look like you've been run over." Hayes staggered closer, gripping his bent bike like a crutch. "You have no idea." The fisherman rushed forward, steadying him by the arm. His grip was firm, his manner calm. "Easy, amigo. Seat." He guided Hayes to a worn cooler by the lantern. "Name's Miguel," the man said. "Miguel Alvarez. You a ranger?" Hayes nodded, catching his breath. "Yeah, Daniel Hayes. Night patrol. And you?" He stopped, blinking through sweat. "You're out here fishing? At this hour?" Miguel grinned fondly. "Catfish don't care what time it is. Besides, night's cooler. Fewer tourists. Just me and the swamp." His grin faded as he studied Hayes' face, the blood smeared on his sleeve, the bruises blooming across his ribs. "But something's out here with you, eh?" Hayes swallowed. "A python. Biggest I've ever seen. It's been hunting me since Shark Valley entrance. Nearly had me twice." Miguel's eyes hardened, though his voice stayed steady. "I've heard of it. So the old man. They say there's a monster snake roaming these parts. Gators give it space. Hunters can't pin it down." He picked up a gaff hook leaning against the bucket, its steel point glinting in the lantern light. "I figured it was stories." Hayes leaned forward, urgency cutting through exhaustion. "It's no story. It's real, and it's out here right now." Miguel considered that, then nodded once, calm as if Hayes had told him a storm was rolling in. "Then we'll face it together." Hayes blinked. "You don't understand. This thing's not normal. It's fast, aggressive, smarter than it should be." Miguel's lips pressed thin, but his tone stayed respectful. "Amigo, I've lived in Florida all my life. I respect the swamp, but I don't fear it. My father used to tell me, fear makes you stupid. Respect keeps you alive. You're not alone anymore. That's worth something." The words steadied Hayes more than he'd admit. His chest still burned, his ankle ached, but a thread of hope wound through his panic. Miguel reached into his cooler, pulled out a dented thermos, and poured water into a tin cup. "Drink, slowly. Hayes drank greedily, then set the cup down, voice rough. I can't stop. I have to make the tower. It's the only safe ground. Miguel nodded. I know the path. 5 miles from here. I was going to pack up anyway. He slung a net over his shoulder and grabbed the gaff. But we move careful. If the snake is guarding the stretch, it will come again. As if summoned, the reeds across the canal shuddered violently. Hayes stiffened. Miguel's gaze snapped to the movement. He set down the bucket, eyes narrowing. Get ready. The python erupted from the grass, scales gleaming like oil under the lantern glow. Its body hit the bank with a crash, coils surging forward. The lantern toppled, spilling light across the mud. Hayes leapt to his feet, knife in hand. There! Miguel stepped between Hayes and the serpent, gaff raised like a spear. Stay behind me. The python struck, jaws wide. Miguel pivoted, jamming the gaff point into its neck. The steel sank shallow, enough to turn the head aside. The serpent thrashed, its body knocking the bucket into the canal with a splash. Hayes lunged forward, slashing at its flank. The blade scored scales, but barely slowed it. The python coiled suddenly, its body whipping around Miguel's legs. He grunted as it yanked, nearly pulling him off balance toward the water. Hold on, Hayes shouted, grabbing the gaff pole with both hands. Together, they heaved, prying the coils apart just enough for Miguel to wrench free. The snake's head darted again, striking at Miguel's chest. He swung the gaff sideways, the steel hook catching the jaw and wrenching it away inches from his ribs. Hayes slashed again, driving the knife deep into the muscle, just below its head. The python shrieked, an awful hiss that rattled Hayes' bones. It recoiled, thrashing through the grass, retreating into shadow as suddenly as it had come. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing. Miguel leaned on the gaff, sweat dripping. He managed a small grin. You weren't exaggerating. Hayes wiped blood, his own and the snake's, from his arm. I told you, it's hunting. It won't stop. Miguel nodded gravely. He picked up his lantern, now dented but still burning. Then we don't stop either. Tower's our goal. He glanced at Hayes, eyes firm but kind. But if it comes again, we stand together. You saved me just now. I won't forget that. Hayes almost smiled, though it hurt his ribs. You could have let it take me. You didn't. Miguel shrugged, shouldering his net. A man alone is just bait. 2 men? That's a fight. They began walking, Miguel steady and deliberate, Hayes limping beside him, pushing his broken bike. The swamp pressed close on both sides, every rustle sharpening their nerves. After a while, Hayes asked quietly, You ever think about leaving this place? Moving somewhere safe? Miguel chuckled softly. Safe is a word city people use. Out here, you learn, nothing is safe. But it's home. My father fished here. His father too. The swamp gives if you respect it. And sometimes it takes. His face sobered. Maybe tonight it decides to take us. Hayes shook his head. Not if I can help it. Miguel gave him a sidelong glance. That's good, amigo. Anger keeps you alive as much as respect does. They pressed on in silence. The swamp alive again with frog calls and insects. But Hayes knew the peace was temporary. The python was still out there, bleeding but alive. And it wasn't finished with them. The swamp was hushed again, as though holding its breath. Hayes and Miguel trudged side by side, lantern swaying with each step, the wounded bike squeaking where Hayes pushed it along. The weight of silence pressed on them harder than the humidity. Finally, Miguel spoke, his voice low. It's bleeding. We cut it deep. That buys us time. Hayes gave a humorless laugh. Time for what? For it to get angrier. Miguel didn't reply, just tightened his grip on the gaff. Up ahead, the trail widened at a culvert crossing, the moon reflecting faintly off the water that ran beneath. Hayes slowed, scanning the shadows. This is where it hit me the first time, he muttered. Miguel raised the lantern higher. Then we don't linger. But a sound broke the stillness. Metal clinking, followed by a low whistle. Hayes stiffened, knife half drawn. Hold, Miguel murmured, lifting his hand. From the reeds on the far side of the culvert, a man emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and a shotgun slung casually across his chest. His clothes were mottled with mud and sweat, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. "You boys look like you seen a ghost," the man drawled. Hayes exhaled, relief and suspicion mixing uneasily. "Who the hell are you?" The man tilted his head. "Carl Jensen, Python hunter. State pays me to track these bastards down." His gaze dropped to Hayes' bruised ribs and Miguel's ripped shirt. "Looks like you already found one." Miguel stepped forward, calm but guarded. "It found us. It's big. Too big." Carl's expression didn't change, though his grip shifted slightly on the shotgun. "How big we talking?" Hayes answered flatly. "Longer than a pickup, stronger than a gator, smarter than it should be." Carl gave a low whistle. "So it's the one they've been whispering about." He spat into the grass. "Figured I'd catch up to it sooner or later." Miguel lifted his chin. "You've hunted before. Can you kill it?" Carl's grin was grim. "That's the plan. Question is, are you two gonna help me or slow me down?" Hayes bristled, but Miguel touched his arm lightly, grounding him. "We stand together. 3 is better than 2. Carl nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then listen close. These snakes, they don't just strike, they set ambushes. I know their tricks. If it's shadowing you, it'll circle back, looking for weakness. So we make it think we're weak. Then we hit it hard." Hayes hesitated. "You're suggesting bait." Carl looked him dead in the eye. "One of us plays mouse, the other 2 play hawks. That's how you kill a monster." Miguel frowned. "That's dangerous." Carl's voice was steel. "It's already dangerous. Question is, do you want to end this or keep running till it finishes you?" Hayes swallowed hard. The idea chilled him, but Carl was right. Running wasn't working. The snake would just keep coming. "All right," Hayes said, "but I'm not the mouse." Carl gave a humorless chuckle. "Didn't figure you for one." They set the trap near the culvert. Miguel planted the lantern on the trail, its glow casting long shadows over the water. Hayes crouched behind the bent bike with his knife, heart pounding. Carl stationed himself in the reeds, shotgun leveled, steady as stone. The swamp grew silent again. Every frog, every insect seemed to vanish. Hayes' pulse filled his ears. Miguel stood in the open, gaff in hand, shoulders squared. He looked calm, almost serene. Hayes whispered sharply, "He shouldn't be out there alone." Carl muttered from the reeds, "Hush. Watch." The minutes stretched like hours. Then the grass rustled. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Hayes' breath caught. He saw the python slide from the reeds on the far side, body thick as a telephone pole, scales glinting like wet leather. It moved without hurry, confident, inevitable. Miguel lifted the gaff, voice steady. "Come on, demon. Let's dance." The serpent struck. It shot forward with terrifying speed, jaws snapping. Miguel twisted aside, gaff hooking its neck. The lantern toppled, lights spinning wildly. "Now!" Hayes shouted. Carl fired. The shotgun blast echoed through the swamp, the slug tearing into the python's flank. The serpent writhed, scales splitting, blood dark in the lantern glow, but didn't retreat. It turned its fury on Carl, lunging into the reeds. Carl fired again, the blast catching in the shoulder, staggering but not stopping. "Damn thing's armored." Carl barked, reloading. Miguel yelled, straining with the gaff as coils whipped around his legs. "It's too strong." Hayes surged forward, knife flashing. He slashed at the coils, wrapping Miguel, cutting shallow furrows but no deeper. The python tightened, dragging Miguel to his knees. Carl stepped from the reeds, shotgun raised for a killing shot. But the serpent was faster. Its body whipped around him, slamming the gun aside, then coiling up his torso with brutal force. Carl grunted, muscles straining. "Hayes, get back." Hayes ignored him, stabbing furiously at the coils. The python's head darted toward Carl's shoulder, jaws clamping down. Carl roared in pain, the sound guttural. "Run!" Carl bellowed, voice hoarse but commanding. "Get out of here!" Hayes froze, knife in hand torn. Carl's eyes met his, fierce even as the coils crushed. "You hear me? Go. Tower's your only chance. I'll hold it." Miguel struggled against his bindings, face twisted in agony. "No, we fight together." Carl gave a bloody grin. "I didn't come out here to live forever. I came to end this son of a bitch. Now move." The python tightened, ribs cracking audibly under the pressure. Carl jammed the shotgun barrel between the coils, forcing space, then locked eyes with Hayes one last time. Live to tell M. That's the job. Hayes' chest heaved. His hand trembled on the knife. Every instinct screamed to stay, to fight, but he knew Carl was right. Miguel's gaff snapped under the strain. Daniel, we can't. We don't have a choice. Hayes grabbed Miguel's arm, yanking him free of a loosened coil. He's giving us time. We have to take it. Miguel's face twisted with anguish, but he didn't resist as Hayes dragged him down the trail. Behind them, Carl's voice rose in a final roar, defiant. Come on, you bastard. Let's finish this. A shotgun blast thundered, followed by the python's furious hiss. Then silence. Hayes and Miguel stumbled forward, half running, half limping, the swamp swallowing the sound behind them. Neither spoke. Neither dared look back. Only when the trail curved and the lantern's glow faded did Miguel whisper, voice raw. He stayed. Hayes swallowed hard, his throat tight. He chose. The swamp pressed in, heavier than ever. But Hayes felt something new burning in his chest. Fury. Carla bought the minutes, maybe more, but the python still lived. And Hayes swore, as he dragged himself toward the watchtower, that Carl's sacrifice would not be for nothing. The trail seemed endless. Every step felt heavier, every sound sharper, as if the swamp itself knew they were trespassing on borrowed time. Hayes limped forward, leaning on the broken bike like a crutch, while Miguel walked beside him, lantern bobbing in his hand. They hadn't spoken since Carl's roar had vanished in a silence behind them. Finally, Miguel broke the quiet, his voice hoarse. We should have stayed. Hayes didn't look at him. We'd be dead too. Miguel's jaw tightened. Better dead fighting than alive running. Hayes stopped, turning on him. His face was pale, sweat dripping, but his eyes burned. Don't you dare make his sacrifice worthless by second-guessing it. Miguel held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. He was a good man. Hayes agreed, softer now. And because of him, we're still breathing. That has to count for something. The swamp around them croaked and buzzed again, life slowly creeping back after the violence. But it sounded different now, mocking almost. They pressed on. The moonlight broke through a patch of open sky, revealing a wide bend in the canal. Miguel raised the lantern higher, his brow furrowing. Wait, look there. On the opposite bank, the ground looked disturbed. Mud churned, grass flattened. Hayes squinted, then his stomach turned. Dozens of tracks. Thick, serpentine grooves that crisscrossed the bank, some as wide as his arm. God almighty, Hayes whispered. It's not just one. Miguel's knuckles whitened around the lantern handle. A nest. Hayes scanned the shadows, knife already in his hand. How many? Miguel shook his head slowly. Hard to tell. But Big Mama, the one chasing us, she's guarding them. That's why she's so vicious. The realization hit Hayes like a blow. She's not just hunting, she's protecting. That's why she won't quit. Miguel turned toward him, eyes grim. Then you understand. Killing her won't be enough. The nest must be burned. Hayes shook his head instantly. We don't have the firepower. We need accelerant, time, backup. We got none of that. Miguel's gaze held steady. We can try. Carl didn't die, so more of these devils could spread. Hayes wanted to argue, but he bit down on the words. The truth was plain. Miguel was right. If this nest lived, the Everglades would drown under it. A low ripple spread across the canal. Hayes stiffened. Miguel lifted the gaff, voice taut. She's here. From the water, a shape broke the surface, scales glistening, eyes catching the moonlight like twin embers. Hayes' breath caught. Move! The python surged out of the water, body crashing onto the trail with terrifying speed. Miguel swung the gaff, catching its snout and shoving sideways. The lantern toppled, hissing as it struck the mud. Hayes dove for it, fumbling to keep it lit. Shadows whipped around him as the serpent's coils lashed, slamming Miguel back against the grass. Miguel, I'm Fina. Miguel grunted, shoving the gaff deeper, trying to wedge it between the jaws. The snake's strength was monstrous, forcing him inch by inch toward the canal. Hayes rushed in, knife stabbing at its flank. The blade sank deeper this time, hot blood spraying his hand. The python hissed furiously, whipping its tail. Hayes was flung aside, crashing into the bike. His vision blurred. He forced himself up, staggering. Miguel cried out, pinned beneath coils tightening across his chest. Daniel. Miguel's voice strained, desperate. Hayes' chest clenched. He hurled himself forward, knife raised high, and drove the blade into the snake's neck with all the strength he had left. The python shrieked, thrashing violently. Miguel ripped himself free, gasping, rolling clear as the coils loosened. Run! Hayes barked. They staggered together down the trail, lantern flickering wildly in Miguel's hand. Behind them, the python writhed in pain, but Hayes knew it wasn't dead. Not yet. The tower was close now. He could see the faint silhouette rising against the stars, skeletal and distant. Safety, if they could reach it, but his body screamed with exhaustion. His ankle throbbed, ribs ached, arms heavy as lead. Every step felt like it might be his last. Miguel kept glancing back, lantern swinging. It's following, bleeding, but still moving. Hayes forced his legs forward. Then we keep moving. Minutes passed like hours. The trail narrowed again, swamp pressing in. Shadows twisted around them. Hayes' ears strained for every sound, each splash, each rustle. At last, they collapsed against a cypress trunk, gasping. The tower was closer now, less than 2 miles. But at their pace, it might as well have been 20. Miguel spoke between breaths. Carr was right. We can't outrun it. We have to end it before the tower. Hayes pressed his forehead against the bark, sweat dripping. In it with what? A pocket knife and a busted gaff. Miguel reached into his pack. From inside, he pulled a small canister, battered but intact. He held it up. Gasoline. For my lantern. Hayes stared, realization dawning. Fire. Miguel nodded. The swamp won't forgive it, but it might save us. And it might stop the nest. Hayes' heart pounded. Fire was dangerous here. One spark could set half the Everglades blazing, but so could an unchecked nest of pythons. Before he could answer, a branch snapped in the darkness. Hayes raised a knife, eyes wide. It's here. The python slid into view, blood trailing from its wounds, but still monstrous, still relentless. Its body rippled like a living nightmare, eyes locked on them. Miguel opened the canister, dousing the gaff's rag-wrapped end. He struck a match, the flame flaring in the swamp air. The gaff ignited, fire licking up the shaft. Ahí es Guisperth, Miguel. Miguel's eyes shone with grim resolve. You get to the tower. I'll hold it. Hayes' chest clenched. No, not again. I'm not leaving another man behind. Miguel gave him a faint smile. Then fight with me. For Carl. For everyone this swamp will swallow if we fail. The python coiled, ready to strike. Hayes tightened his grip on the knife, standing shoulder to shoulder with Miguel. His voice was steady now, anchored by fury and resolve. Then we end it here. The serpent surged forward, jaws wide. Miguel swung the flaming gaff, fire streaking through the night. Hayes lunged low, blade gleaming. The battle was about to begin, man, fire, and steel against a monster born of shadows. And this time, neither intended to run. The swamp smelled of wet earth and smoke before Hayes even saw the fire. Miguel's gaff flared, the rag at its tip ignited and glowing like a brand of justice. The python lay coiled near the trail, blood darkening its scales, its massive head raised in menace. Its tongue flicked, tasting the air, sensing the heat, calculating the fight. Hayes pressed his knife against his palm, fingers white with grip. His ribs screamed, ankle throbbed, but Renoline muted the pain. You ready? He shouted, voice tight but steady. Miguel's eyes glinted in the lantern light. Ready as I'll ever be. Hayes swallowed. As ready as anyone can be against this thing. Miguel stepped forward, fire-tipped gaff held high. I'll draw its attention. You go low, hit where it's weakest. Hayes nodded, swallowing another gulp of swamp air. Got it. Go. Miguel lunged, swinging the gaff in a wide arc. The fire hissed as it scorched the wet reeds surrounding the python. The monster recoiled, distracted, giving Hayes the opening he needed. He lunged low, knife angled at the underside of the snake, stabbing into the thick scales along its belly. The python shrieked, thrashing violently, and twisted its body, knocking Hayes backward into a mud bank. His knife tore free with a sickening pop, leaving a shallow line of blood. Miguel shouted, "Flames winging." Now, again, Hayes scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. He lunged again, blade sinking deeper. The python hissed, retreating slightly, but it wasn't done. Its massive coils whipped like living ropes, smashing against tree trunks, sending splintered wood and mud flying. Hayes barely dodged, rolling across the ground, mud in his eyes. "It's stronger than I thought." Miguel didn't answer. He struck again with the gaff, flames licking across the serpent's head. The python shrieked in fury, jaws snapping, fangs glinting dangerously close to Miguel's chest. Hayes lunged forward, blade flashing, and caught the python in the side again. Blood sprayed across his arm. He grunted, pain and effort blending. The creature twisted suddenly, coils slamming into both of them. Hayes was sent sprawling, sliding across wet mud. He felt the crushing weight of the serpent's body, heard Miguel grunt as the python's tail whipped across him. Hayes scrambled up, sliding the knife along the snake's back, looking for any weak spot. "Miguel, we need to push it into the water," he shouted. Miguel nodded, eyes narrowing, gaff ready. Together, they ran, herding the serpent toward the canal. Each step was treacherous, mud slick, roots hidden, the python snapping at their heels. Hayes' ribs burned, his vision blurred, but he kept moving, shouting, stabbing, forcing it back. The python hissed violently, thrashing to escape, but the flames and relentless pressure drove it toward the canal's edge. Hayes slipped on wet mud, almost falling. "Watch the tail," he shouted. Miguel spun, jabbing the gaff into the python's neck. The monster recoiled, striking out with its head, but Hayes drove his knife under its jaw, puncturing muscle. The python screeched, coils tightening dangerously around a cypress root, splintering it. Hayes and Miguel lunged simultaneously, forcing the beast closer to the water. Its massive body hit the canal, slipping partially into the black water. But it writhed, thrashing violently, almost taking Miguel with it. Hayes shouted, "Hold on, don't let it drag you." Miguel's boots slipped, mud giving way, and the gaff wrenched from his hands. He grabbed onto Hayes' arm, yanking himself upright just as the python surged again. The serpent's massive head lashed, fangs snapping inches from Hayes' shoulder. Hayes' knife sank again, this time into a joint where the muscles were weaker. The python let out a final, ear-splitting shriek, its body convulsing violently. Miguel picked up a fallen branch, igniting it with the remnants of the gaff's fire. Flames licked along the scales, scorching the serpent further. Hayes drove his blade upward, finding a seam beneath the head. The python recoiled, thrashing, its massive bulk slipping fully into the canal. Water splashed, mud flying, and for a moment, the entire swamp seemed to hold its breath. Then it was gone. Hayes dropped to his knees, chest heaving, ribs screaming with every breath. Mud and blood coated him. His knife slipped from his hands. Miguel's voice was hoarse. "Dead? I think so." Hayes rubbed at his face, fingers sticky with blood. "I can't believe we made it." Miguel sank to a nearby log, chest heaving. Carl would have been proud. "You held together, Daniel." Hayes looked at him, voice trembling with exhaustion. "We couldn't have done it without you, Miguel. You kept your head. You didn't run." Miguel gave a weak smile. "City folk call me brave. I just call it smart. Respect the swamp, respect the creatures. Know when to fight and when to use your head." Hayes shook his head, still trying to process everything. That thing could have swallowed me like a loaf of bread. Miguel nodded. "Yeah, and it would have, if we weren't ready. That's why Carl stayed behind. So we could live. So we could finish it." Hayes' chest tightened. I keep seeing him, his face, his roar, the way he gave his life. Miguel put a hand on his shoulder. "You remember him. You fight for him. That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence, listening to the swamp slowly return to normal. Frogs croaked. The tower stairs creaked under their combined weight. mud and blood tracking over each step. Hayes led, glancing over the railing at the black water and reeds below. Shadows moved with unsettling randomness, the swamp alive in ways he hadn't noticed until now. At last, they reached the platform. Hayes leaned against the railing, gasping, vision blurred. Miguel dropped onto a metal bench, lantern in hand. "We need a rest," he said simply. Hayes shook his head. "Rest? Not yet. Not while those eggs, those babies are out there. We have to do something." Miguel's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose, genius? Leap down there with knives and fire and hope we survive?" Hayes groaned, rubbing his face. "I don't know. There has to be a way to neutralize them before they grow, before more Carls," he didn't say aloud. The thought stuck in his throat. Miguel's hand rested on his shoulder. "We start by mapping, finding their location, knowing where the nest is. That's the only way we'll survive the rest of the night." Hayes nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but we need to be smart. No heroics, no ruse." Carl paid for that lesson. They crouched near the tower's edge, scanning the swamp with flashlights. The water glinted faintly, but the grass beyond was motionless, or at least seemed so. Hayes got twisted with unease. A faint ripple, then another. "Small, quick. Movement," Miguel whispered. Hayes' eyes widened. There, near that clump of reeds, two shapes slithered, barely noticeable in the darkness. Thin, young, but fast, eerily coordinated. Miguel hissed, dropping the lantern onto the platform. "Little ones." Confirmed. Hayes crouched lower. "How many?" Miguel Esquintez. "At least 5. Could be more hiding in the reeds. And they're learning, watching, listening." Hayes swallowed hard. "Learning? You mean tracking us?" Miguel nodded. "Every movement we make teaches them. The swamp is their classroom, and we're the lesson." Hayes felt a cold wave of panic wash over him. "So, we're back to running." Miguel shook his head firmly. "No, not running. Planning. We mark the nest, contain it, and alert the Python Challenge team. We don't fight this one-on-one. Not now. Survival comes first." Hayes' chest tightened as he nodded. "Right. Step 1, reconnaissance. We make it count." They moved cautiously down the stairs, leaving the safety of the platform. Hayes pushed the bike along the muddy trail, ears straining for the slightest sound. The young pythons were clever, far smarter than they looked. Each shadow, each rustle of reeds could be a scout. Miguel crouched, lantern swinging low. "We need markers. Anything that stands out. Bright cloth, sticks, spray paint, whatever we have. The team has to know where the eggs are." Hayes dug through his pack, pulling out scraps of tape and bits of bright cloth. They laid them along the path toward the suspected nest area. Then Hayes froze. A branch snapped, soft, deliberate from the shadows ahead. Miguel raised the gaff, lantern angled. "They're watching us." A smaller python slithered into the clearing, body thin but deceptively long. Its head lifted, tongue flicking, eyes gleaming in the lantern light. Hayes' heart pounded. "Easy," Miguel whispered, voice tense. "We don't make sudden moves." Hayes' hand shook as he held the flashlight steady. "You sure about that?" Miguel's lips pressed thin. "They're learning from fear. Show them calm, and they hesitate. Don't show fear." The python hesitated, head swaying, tongue flicking the air. Hayes felt its attention on them, studying their movements. Every instinct screamed to strike, to run, to panic, but they held firm. Miguel whispered, "Step back slowly. Keep calm. Mark the location." Hayes nodded, moving deliberately, planting a strip of tape near the base of a reed clump. The young python watched, but didn't move. "Good," Miguel said quietly. "One down. Don't make eye contact. We don't want it to feel threatened." Hayes swallowed, voice low. "How many more?" Miguel's eyes scanned the reeds. "I don't know. At least a few more. Maybe 10. Maybe 15. But if we do this right, we can mark the entire nest without getting ourselves eaten." Hayes chuckled dryly, rubbing his ribs. "You make it sound so easy." Miguel gave a small, grim smile. "It's easy if you don't die." They moved carefully along the edge of the reeds, tape and cloth marking each clump of disturbed grass, each depression in the mud that could be an egg. Hayes kept one hand on the bike, ready to push it between himself and any advancing python. A faint rustle, a bigger movement this time. Hayes' breath hitched. Miguel's voice was steady but low. That one's bigger. Don't provoke it. Hayes froze. The python emerged slowly, a juvenile, yet massive compared to the smallest of the clutches. Its head rose, neck curving like a living whip, eyes glinting in the lantern light, tongue flicking rapidly. Hayes' pulse roared in his ears. It's watching us. Calculating. Miguel nodded. Exactly. Stay calm. Don't react. The python slithered closer, stopping a few feet away. Hayes could see the patterns on its scales, already reminiscent of its mother. Hayes whispered, "We can't fight these, not now." Miguel shook his head. "We don't have to. We survive first. Then we notify the teams. Then we deal with the rest." Hayes nodded, planting another piece of tape. Slowly, deliberately, they traced a path through the reeds, marking the positions of each clutch. Finally, they stepped back, surveying their work. Every patch of disturbed grass marked. Every suspected egg location noted. Hayes exhaled, muscles trembling. "We did it. At least for now." Miguel's voice was quiet, tinged with respect. "For now, the swamp will keep teaching its lessons. But we survived. That counts." Hayes glanced at the water, then the tower in the distance. "We need to get back up there. Call it in. Warn the team. Miguel nodded. And we rest. We survive the night first." Hayes pressed a hand to his chest, wincing. Carl would have been proud. "But I keep thinking of him, Miguel. All of this, it's because of him." Miguel's eyes were steady. "We honor him by living, by being smarter than the swamp tonight. That's how we repay him." Hayes nodded, swallowing. "Then let's go. The tower. The night isn't over, and neither are we." Together, they turned, trudging back through the mud toward the skeletal watchtower. Above them, the Everglades stretched, alive and endless, and somewhere in the reeds, the young pythons watched, learning, waiting. The tower creaked under their weight, swaying slightly in the swamp breeze. Hayes leaned against the railing, chest tight, ribs screaming with every breath. Miguel perched on a rusted bench, lantern swinging lightly, eyes scanning the reeds below like a predator himself. Hayes shook his head, voice rough. "I thought marking the nest would be enough. I thought we'd have a chance to rest." Miguel shook his head slowly, gaze never leaving the shadows. "The swamp doesn't stop. We gave a mother a lesson, yes, but the babies, they're curious. They learn fast." Hayes clenched his fists. Curious or hunting? Miguel's voice was flat. "Both." The first movement came like a whisper, a ripple across the water, so subtle Hayes almost didn't notice. Then another, and another. Small shapes slithered in the reeds, closer, moving deliberately, eyes glinting in the lantern light. Hayes tensed. "How many?" Miguel counted silently, then whispered, "At least 6. Could be more hiding. They are testing us." Hayes' stomach sank. "Testing us. They're watching, learning, same as their mother did. They've inherited her cunning." Hayes swallowed, gripping the railing. "So what? They'll just attack if we step outside." Miguel nodded. "We can't let them surround us. Not here. Not on the tower. We need space. Options." Hayes' heart pounded as he surveyed the swamp. The reeds swayed slightly, concealing movement, revealing it, then hiding it again. Every ripple of shadow felt like a heartbeat. A small python darted forward, barely visible against the dark mud. It hissed a short, sharp sound. Hayes' stomach clenched. "They're bold," he whispered. "Too bold." Miguel's hand rested on his gaff. They've learned that predators can be defeated. They'll push boundaries. Hayes leaned close to the railing, voice tight. "We can't fight them all. Not out there." Miguel's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight smart. Trap them, scare them, intimidate. We don't get swallowed alive because we panic." Hayes swallowed. He had to calm down. Carl's face flashed in his mind. Sacrifice, courage, clarity in chaos. He drew in a long breath. "Okay, smart. We do this smart." The first small python surged closer, sliding up the bank toward the tower's base. Hayes leaned over the railing, holding a lantern over the edge. "We'll burn some light. Keep them from swarming the base." Miguel nodded. And I'll wedge the gaff here. Force them into a choke point if they get too close. The snake recoiled from the light, its tongue flicking rapidly. Hayes whispered, "See? Fear works." Miguel glanced at him, voice low. For now, another movement, larger, faster, emerged from the reeds. Two young pythons, slightly bigger than the first, slipped through shallow water and mud, moving in near-perfect coordination. Hayes' pulse spiked. "They're working together," he muttered. Miguel's eyes hardened. "We need to distract one, control the other. Make them think twice." Hayes' hands shook slightly as he grabbed a discarded piece of the bent bike frame. "Throw this at the one on the left." Miguel nodded, and with a flick of the wrist, Hayes hurled the metal piece. It clanged against a tree trunk near the python, startling it. The reptile recoiled, tongue flicking furiously. "Good," Miguel whispered. "Now, they're hesitant. Use that." Hayes raised the lantern, swinging it in a wide, arc firelight danced across scales. The snakes hissed, retreating slightly but circling, calculating. "They're not going to leave," Hayes muttered. "They're waiting, watching, learning from the mistake." Miguel's jaw tightened. "Then we make the next move count." Timing, Daniel. Precision. A larger shape slipped from the reeds. A juvenile, but bigger than either had imagined, probably one of the mother's strongest offspring. Its head lifted, eyes bright, tongue flicking rapidly. Hayes felt the instinctual panic rising, but he forced it down. "Stay calm," Miguel whispered. "They sense fear. Don't give them that." Hayes nodded, swallowing. "Okay, calm. Control." Miguel adjusted the gaff, flame from the lantern flickering against the steel. "We heard them. Keep them toward the water. They don't like deep open areas. It's instinct." Hayes gritted his teeth. "Then we push. Slowly. No sudden moves." They began their dance, careful, deliberate. Hayes swung the lantern, illuminating the edges of the swamp, while Miguel used the gaff to nudge the snakes, forcing them toward the canal. The young pythons hissed and recoiled but continued their slow, deliberate approach, always probing, always learning. Hayes gritted his teeth. "They're too smart." Miguel's voice was calm but forceful. "Smart, yes, but coordinated mistakes? They make those too. Just need to wait for the opening." Another small python surged forward unexpectedly, sliding along the mud at alarming speed. Hayes jabbed the lantern toward it, fire flaring. It hissed, retreating slightly, but another moved in to replace it. "They adapt fast," Hayes muttered. Miguel's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt faster. Watch for patterns. Force the same mistake twice. That's how predators are beaten. Predictable habits." Hayes studied the movement. They circle. One attacks, the others hesitate. The second always waits for the first to retreat. "Good observation," Miguel whispered. "Use it. Timer moves." Hayes nodded. He tossed the lantern toward the far bank, flames flaring as the snake closest to him recoiled. Miguel jabbed the gaff at another, herding it backward toward the canal. Slowly, carefully, inch by inch, they managed to force the snakes into shallower areas. Eyiske. Esti burned, ribs screaming, sweat dripping into his eyes. "It's exhausting," he muttered. Miguel's eyes were sharp. "Exhaustion is dangerous. Rest only when you're safe." Not until then. Another surge. Two snakes lunged almost simultaneously, testing the tower's base. Hayes barely blocked with the lantern, fire flaring across the mud. Miguel swung the gaff, striking one in the flank, forcing it back toward the canal. "Keep them in the shallow water." Miguel shouted. "Force them where they can't climb. They'll hesitate on the mud bank." Hayes swung the lantern again, illuminating the bank. The snakes hissed and recoiled. They were clever, but predictable. Pushed too far, forced too quickly. Hayes stabbed the ground with the bike frame, blocking a small python's path. Miguel jabbed the gaff again, fire licking across its scales. The snake hissed, retreated into shallow water with the others. Hayes exhaled sharply, muscles trembling. "We did it," Hayes panted. "We..." A rustle near the reeds made him stop mid-breath. Another python, larger than any he'd seen, surged forward. Eyes bright, body coiled for a strike. Miguel cursed under his breath. "One more." The last one. Careful. This one's learning from all the others. Hayes' pulse surged. Then we wait. Precision. Timing. Miguel and Nadif. Together. 1, 2, 3 now. Hayes swung the lantern to startle it. Miguel jabbed with the gaff. The snake recoiled, miscalculating, slipping partially into the shallow water. Hayes lunged with the bike frame, forcing it fully into the canal. Water splashed, mud flying. The python thrashed, but had no leverage on the wet slope. Hayes collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. That's all of them. Miguel nodded slowly, still catching his breath. For now, they'll regroup eventually, but we've contained them tonight. Hayes sank to the floor, muscles trembling. I can't believe we made it through again. Miguel sat beside him, lantern glowing softly. We survived because we adapted, because we stayed calm, because we remembered Carl. Hayes closed his eyes, thinking of the man who had bought them all this time. Carl would have wanted us to finish it, to live, and we did. Miguel's gaze was steady. Yes, and we honor him by surviving, by knowing when to fight and when to use our heads. That's how we win the swamp's game. Hayes opened his eyes, looking toward the shadowed reeds, feeling the weight of the night pressing down. The swamp doesn't forgive. The lessons aren't over. Miguel and Nadif. No, they aren't. But tonight we survived. That's enough to start. Hayes breathed deeply, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. But deep in the reeds, the Everglades watched, patient, eternal, and hungry for its next lesson. The swamp was eerily quiet. Hayes perched on the top platform of the watchtower, lantern casting long shadows across the trail. The Everglades stretched endlessly, a sea of black water, reeds, and twisted cypress knees. Every sound, the soft splash of water, the hiss of insects, the rustle of reeds, felt amplified in the still night. Miguel leaned against the railing, gaff in hand, fire from the lantern reflecting off his weathered face. They had survived the mother python, marked the nest, and forced the juveniles into shallow water. For now, the threat was contained, but both men knew better than to trust the swamp. Hayes rubbed his ribs, still throbbing from the battles below. I thought the worst was behind us, he muttered, but I can't shake the feeling something's still out there. Miguel's eyes narrowed. There always is. That's the swamp's nature. You fight one monster and another emerges. But tonight, we finish this, or it finishes someone. Hayes exhaled sharply. Yeah, I keep thinking of Carl. We survived because of him. He didn't. And yet, we're still here, still breathing. Miguel placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Carl's not gone. Not really. He's in every careful move we make, in every choice to survive. That's how we honor him. A faint ripple in the water below snapped Hayes' attention to the reeds. Movement, small, deliberate. Here we go, Miguel whispered, eyes tracking the shadows. The young ones are restless, hungry, curious, and smart. Hayes' stomach twisted. We contained them before. We should be safe up here. Miguel shook his head. Safe is an illusion in the swamp. They've been watching, learning. Now they test us. Hayes scanned the canal. Several small shapes slid through the reeds, almost invisible against the black water. Their heads lifted, tongue flicking rapidly, eyes glinting in the faint light. They're coordinating, Hayes muttered, just like their mother. Miguel and Nadif. Exactly. They remember her lessons. And now they improvise. Hayes' fingers tightened around the railing. We can't fight all of them down there. Not without getting eaten. Miguel's eyes were sharp. Then we don't fight. We fight smart. Fire, barricade, leverage. Keep them in the water. Force mistakes. Hayes swallowed, chest tight. Smart, okay. We do this smart. No heroics. Just survive. A juvenile surged forward, striking toward the base of the tower. Hayes grabbed a lantern and swung it, flames flaring, illuminating the snake's scales. It hissed, recoiled, then struck again, faster this time, learning from its previous attempt. Too close. Hayes shouted, fire flaring across the mudbank. Miguel jabbed the gaff into the water, forcing another juvenile back. Keep them at bay. Don't let them climb. Hayes swung the lantern like a weapon, illuminating each slithering body. The small pythons hissed, circling, probing, testing their limits. Hayes' pulse roared, ribs burning, muscles screaming. "They're clever," he muttered. "Too clever." Miguel's jaw tightened. Smart is not invincible. Patterns, predictable moves. Force them into mistakes. Hayes studied the movements. They circle. One strikes, the others hesitate. The same mistake twice, they'll make it again. Miguel's eyes gleamed. Exactly. Precision. Timing. Don't rush. Hayes nodded, swinging the lantern to startle a small python near the canal's edge. It recoiled, then lunged again toward the shallow mud. Miguel jabbed with the gaff, flames licking across scales. The snake shrieked, retreating. Hayes lunged, pushing it further into deeper water where it struggled for leverage. "Good," Miguel whispered. "Keep it up. Force them all into the same trap." Hayes and Miguel worked in perfect sync, fire and steel guiding, herding controlling. Each strike, each movement deliberate, calculated. Slowly, the pythons were pushed toward the canal, trapped in the water where their size and weight worked against them. But then a rustle from the reeds. A larger shape emerged. One of the mother's strongest offspring, perhaps only half-grown, but massive compared to the others. Its eyes locked onto the tower, tongue flicking, muscles coiling for a strike. Hayes' heart surged. "That's too big, too fast." Miguel's voice was calm, but forceful. "We stick to the plan. Don't panic. Precision. 1, 2, 3 now." Hayes swung the lantern, fire flaring. Miguel jabbed the gaff, driving the python toward the water. The creature struck, fangs snapping inches from Miguel's arm. Hayes lunged, pushing it into the canal. Mud splashed, water roiled, but the snake was trapped. Hayes collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. "Is that it?" Miguel's voice was low, steady. "For tonight. Contained, but never truly gone. They'll regroup. They'll learn. But we've survived, and we've marked the nest. That's how we win. Awareness. Caution." Hayes swallowed, staring out into the black swamp. "Carl, you wouldn't have made it. Not against this." Miguel's gaze was steady. "But he gave us a chance. That's all life asks sometimes. One chance. We honor him by surviving, by being smarter, stronger." Hayes nodded, finally allowing himself a breath of relief. The lantern's glow reflected off the water, shadows moving like silent watchers. The Everglades, eternal and unforgiving, stretched around them, alive with unseen eyes. He leaned against Miguel, voice quiet. "We did it. For now." Miguel nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "For now. The swamp never stops, Daniel. But neither do we." That's what Carl would have wanted. The tower creaked, swaying slightly, but the men were steady. Exhausted, battered, bloodied, but alive. They had survived the mother, contained her offspring, and marked the nest for the Python Challenge team to handle. Hayes' eyes swept the reeds, the black water, the endless swamp. "The swamp is patient," he whispered, "and it's always watching." Miguel's lips pressed thin. "So are we, and that makes all the difference." They sat in silence, the night pressing in, heavy with unseen life. Somewhere in the distance, a faint ripple passed through the water. One of the young ones, perhaps, watching, learning. But the immediate danger had passed. Hayes closed his eyes, thinking of Carl, the man who had bought them time, who had given his life for them. He breathed in the swamp air, thick, wet, and alive. "We honor him," he whispered, "by surviving, by finishing the fight when it matters, by remembering." Miguel's voice was quiet, steady, and by knowing that tonight, we are stronger, smarter, alive. Hayes opened his eyes, gazing at the dark horizon. The swamp would never forgive. The Everglades would never rest. But tonight they had prevailed, and sometimes surviving was the greatest victory of all. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the distant cypress, the men leaned on the railing, exhausted but resolute. Behind them, the reeds stirred, the water rippled, and somewhere, small shapes retreated into the darkness, waiting, watching, learning. But Hayes and Miguel were alive, and they would continue to watch back.